So, this duel is a three-parter. I know that's a weird reaction to start off with, but I feel like we haven't had, like, a three-parter that wasn't, like, the big climactic duel of the arc in a long time. I don't know. I mean, yeah, you can make the argument. Last episode, it was just Robopi's opening turn, and since there's a lot being set up, I assume the duel will probably end fairly quickly next week, so we can get into what other crazy shit I is planning. But yeah, I don't know why that just kind of stuck with me for a minute. Like, oh, it's a three-parter. We actually used to have these fairly common back in the day, but nowadays everything seems to like its 2-episode intervals. Yeah, so. That's kind of, again, that's a weird way to open the video, just a strange thing I noticed. Though because the episode is mostly just a duel, there's not a ton to talk about, but there is some stuff to talk about. So let's start off with the duel, because I kind of find this one a little interesting, because both Robopi and Soulburner are playing their decks both pretty effectively. Like, there's not just a ton of shoving new cards in there. It's mostly a lot of sticking to an actual strategy and rolling with it. First up, Robopi. I really like all his spell cards have strong, actual useful protection effects, but then include draw effects. Like, that's what a lot of, like, lower tier decks do. They just kind of take advantage of all these weird draw cards that are in the game that can't really be used by meta decks. So to see him just be like, I do a protection effect, and I get to draw a card. I banish your monsters, and I draw 2 cards. I don't know why. Just something about that is kind of funny. Just like, sure, my deck may be low tier, but I'll draw something good eventually. That's what that kind of feels like. And then we get Homura's deck, and what I kind of like about this is that he played it all mostly meta. Like, literally, the minute he summons the Gazelle, I'm like, you dirty one of top decking meta sheep asshole. That was my first reaction. But then he just goes ahead and just plays Salamangreat's right. I kept expecting here's the moment where they just force a new card for the deck into the episode, but like, no, for the most part, everything he did made sense. Yeah, we got, I think Lemming is a new card, and we saw him send something new off to the grave with Jackal. Not Jaguar, Gazelle. But for the most part, he just does everything correctly. Like, go into the Mirage Stalio, special summon a monster, link so you can bounce shit back. I love the Mirage Stalio summoning. Like, holy shit, I have never seen such a dedicated 30 seconds of animation that looks that epic for a monster that just exists to link climb. Like, that was actually kind of cool. Although, when you see how much animation time the Salamangreats get, you suddenly realize how this episode makes it to the 25-minute mark. But no, and then he just, like, goes into Sunlight Wolf, gets the Gazelle back, goes into Baylynx, gets his field spell, goes into Heat Leo, reincarnate Lynx, uses Heat Leo. Like, that's really what you do with Salamangreat. And even Robopi's counterplays actually made sense. Robopi took out the Baylynx. Robopi banished the Heat Leo. Like, everything Robopi did made a lot of sense. And the only 2 cards Homura used that weren't really meta were the equip spells, but those are actually decent equip spells. It's just that the direction Salamangreat went in the real world became much more reliant on the deck's stun aspects, hence why they played so many hand traps, and also part of the reason Phantasme stayed at like $100 for 6 months. Yeah, no, like, he did everything correctly, and a lot of the lower tier Salamangreat cards are fun in more casual builds. So, yeah, the reason I bring this up is because it just feels so weird and out of nowhere to see decks played this meta efficiently in the anime. Because, well, we've seen a lot of meta decks come out of Vrains. Rather, it's your Trickstars, Goki, Ultrageist, now Rockets. Which means Yusaku better up his fucking game. Like, nothing he plays is important in the real world. But yeah, like, I don't know, it's just kind of interesting to see that. Because one thing they do that annoys the crap out of me with, like, they did it mostly to Trickstars. Goki got it kind of bad too. Ultrageist and Rockets a little bit. But with the first two, they just kind of started shoving in as many cards as possible, like as many Trick Stars as possible. And here's a bunch of Goki links that no one has any desire to use. And you can make the argument, especially with Trick Stars, since they became popular, if you put in more Trick Stars, it's going to help sell sets. But when Aoi just shifts strategies halfway through a duel just to summon the new crap that no one cares about, it just kind of reminds you that this is all just a commercial and gets kind of annoying. But here, like, they actually stayed focused on just playing Salamangreat correctly. Now, you can make the argument this is because Salamangreat got a lot more cards at once because they had a structure deck, so they might not just have that many new cards in mind for the deck, but I don't know, it just kind of, it makes the duel feel more intelligent when it's being done correctly. Like, he was one Phantasme away from me being like, okay, they just copied an actual list. So yeah, that was the duel. Moving on to the other part of the episode, I find the sort of philosophical commentary on anger and grief thing going on kind of interesting in this. First and foremost, the scene that kind of came out of nowhere is when Homura offers to give Robopi an out. He just says that, look man, throw the duel now, you get to live, just tell us where I is and what's going on. That's all I want. You can make the argument this is a little out of character for Homura, as he's the kind of person who usually wants justice, and considering Robopi took out Blood Shepherd and Emma with a smile on his face, you think he'd be like, fuck you, but maybe he's also like, Blood Shepherd was a dick and we're better off without him. But no, it's an interesting scene because it sort of shows that our human characters can sort of be capable of a bit more than our AI characters, in a sense. I wish Kusunagi didn't go and spell this out for everybody, because I felt like it was well conveyed by the plot. And that is that Robopi and I may be more intelligent than the average human, but because of the way they are, they're emotionally very immature, and they're being motivated by anger and revenge and sadness. And this is kind of interesting because it's a nice stark contrast to our other two villains. Revolver and Lightning were both motivated by a philosophical goal, and the show made sure to keep reminding you of that. But here, Ai is motivated mostly by emotion, and they find a lot of nice ways to keep integrating that into the dialogue. Rather, it's the way that Ai kind of keeps saying to everybody, it's like, I lost everything, fuck you. Or the way he's kind of going after everything in this very precise manner, and you kind of see it spread. Almost sort of like this idea that revenge and anger and sadness is like this spreading disease. I know that's not the most original metaphor in the world, but stick with me, I'm going somewhere with this. Because it spreads to Robopi, who, when you think about it, is just this innocent, childlike being who, by all accounts, could have ended up good and fine. And by all accounts, Robopi didn't want to originally be a psychopath. He didn't want to be killing people all willy-nilly. Robopi just wanted to become better and smarter and all that stuff. But because Ai just wants to use Robopi for his own selfish goals, he turns Robopi into this lunatic who just wants to destroy everything. And then you see that anger and that hatred spread to everything else in the encompassing area. You see all our major characters, after going through their own arcs and wanting to continue to grow as people and better themselves, they all just get taken out of Ai's anger. Like, that's interesting, and you see how that even goes even further. Look at Soul Technologies. Yeah, they're a big part of the antagonistic element of the show, but the average worker, like who Akira's assistant was talking to, is just a dude just trying to make a living and support a family and have a day job. Like, you see that anger and that revenge, how that kind of poisons everything around it. And this is interesting because our protagonist was going down this road too. And to a lesser extent, so was Homura. And to an even lesser extent, so was Revolver. Like, that was Yusaku's motivation, was revenge. And you sort of saw how that got curbed and stopped because of all the other people he met and all that stuff. But Ai doesn't have that because he's kind of burnt all those bridges. And it's interesting to see how that's all coming to a head as we see this Robopi duel go on and just sort of the effects of this spreading anger. And it's just compelling and it's interesting. I also did love the bit where Obapi's like, if you protected Flame, this wouldn't have happened. And Usaku's kind of like, man, there was no way to avoid it. I would have loved it if Obapi was like, if you losers just played Ash Blossom or like Phantasme or Troll and Lockbird to beat Bowman, then it wouldn't have. Like, just really like lay in how bad their decks are sometimes. And don't hand me any of this crap, they can't afford this shit. Aoi is rich. Get her to loan you a playset. So, yeah, that was this episode. Interesting duel, interesting kind of aspects brought up. Tell me what you think about all that below. And as for the TCG question of the week, Worlds! This weekend! Pretty certain. I haven't really been paying attention to what's going on with Worlds since I've been preparing for PPG Philly. But, who do you think is taking it? What deck do you think will take it? Can America finally win Yu-Gi-Oh! Worlds? Probably not, and probably Sky Striker. But yeah, tell me that below. And as always, click to like, click to subscribe, and join me next week as we watch Robopi probably be the fall guy.